Mistakes were made. We thought this was going to be the year. We thought the Bears were going to be good again. But they've just fired their offensive coordinator, and the season seems to be circling the drain. So this week, we're changing the name of the podcast. Welcome to Bear Errors. So welcome to Bear Errors for the week. We've changed the name of the show, and we're going to try and have a little bit of fun. We know it's been a really rough week to be a Bears fan. And as such, we have a special guest. Our super producer, Mike Mercado, gets to join the big show for the first time. Mike, how you doing?
I am doing better than the Chicago Bears are, and hopefully we are here to support our entire Bears community. How you guys doing?
I think we're doing all right. The end of the Flus era is here. Even if it's not here this week, we think we know it's coming. Ciaran, do you have your emergency box packed? Are you prepared for this particular disaster, or are you just winging it?
How about them Bulls, eh?
So you do have your emergency box packed, as many Bears fans do. Anyways, we're going to try and keep it light this week. And as such, we're going to do something kind of fun that I sort of cooked up about a month ago when Bears football was still fun. So don't hold it against me, but we're going to do a little bit of an unboxing. Unboxing videos are pretty fun. I've sent a box to each of the guys. I've not told them what's inside. I told them do not open it upon punishment of death because we are going to open it live on the podcast. That time has finally come. Thanks very much to the Brussels mail handlers. They eventually got the package to Ireland, and now a month later we're ready to go, and all the fun's been sucked out of the Bears season. But regardless, this is going to be a good time. So you guys both have a box in front of you. Go ahead and fire that sucker up. Open it up. Take a look at what's inside. Let's see if we can't spread a little pre-Christmas joy to people.
Is it a new head coach?
Sorry, couldn't afford that. Too expensive. I sound like a Bears, don't I?
Wow. This is awesome. All right.
Wow. Yeah, it doesn't quite fit. Not life-sized. Might fit on your dog if you have a very small dog, but yes. So I know a guy, and he was able to take what we've done here at Bear Era, throw it on some mini helmets. We've got the logo on the back. The stripe is from the Chicago City flag with the 4 red stars. I thought they were pretty fun. They came out great. They're matte navy. You guys can, I was going to say like put them on your shelves with pride, but that's going to be a little bit difficult given where the Bears are right now, but I hope you guys enjoy them. It was something fun I thought we could do for the show, and I thought they came out pretty well.
This is awesome. Ciaran, I know you are a huge Chicago sports fan. You got a connection here just like EJ, so to see the Chicago flag, which you guys know here, you know, me being here in Chicago, how much the civic pride is for the civil pride for the flag, and obviously EJ, for you to think about us like that, this is pretty cool. I'll tell you this much too: these are better than the orange crush that they decide to wear always on Thursday Night Football. So maybe this should be the alternatives. You guys are looking for a great somebody come up with a great design. EJ, thank you, brother. This is amazing, man.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun to do, and again, brings us a small bit of joy in what has not been a joyous Bears season so far. But we will have Mike back later in the show for his Mike on the Mic segment. But for now, we thought that was fun to share with you, so we'll get into the rest of it right now. With that, we're going to kick into the rest of the show this week. Thanks to all of you who are following along. I realize that's like 12 people after what the Bears have put everybody through for the last several weeks, but everybody that's been here, subscribed, clicked, commented, asked questions for Fan Questions of the Week. We appreciate all of you, and we will be here for the rest of the season, no matter what. That's our promise to you. And some primary partners that support us will also be here. Blue Wire Podcast, where you can find us on their audio feeds, and Homage Clothing. I'm actually wearing a "You'll shoot your eye out" t-shirt, which is homage because I kind of feel like that's where we are as Bears fans. Whenever the Bears have a chance to have anything nice, oh, you'll get a generational quarterback. You'll shoot your eye out. Poor Ralphie, right? Couldn't get the BB gun. Bears can't get the coaching decision right. I thought it was appropriate. So for everybody that's already in the comments enraged that I wore a green shirt on Packers week, look, it's a Christmas shirt. It has nothing to do with the Packers, but homage gave it to me, and we're really excited. They're keeping us looking good this season. With that, season summary, we're going to keep it really short because it is not super fun. Bears are 4-5. Upcoming schedule is Packers, Vikings, and Lions. I said last week they might only win 1 or 2 more times this year. I thought that was the Seahawks game and possibly a split with the Vikings. How y'all feeling now about that prediction? Yeah, I don't think they're probably going to win any games for the rest of the season. That would have them ending up right where they're at. 4 and whatever is probably likely. They might sneak a win in. I don't know where it would be. That would be a 5-win team looking at a high draft pick. I feel like any win at this point would be extremely fortunate now, given what we know. Ciaran, what's your take on all that?
You don't have us beating the Packers?
I don't have us beating the Packers, even if they start Malik. How's that?
Yeah, it's been a rough one. You said we're going to be here every single week. The question's going to be, will Eberflus be here every single week? That's going to be, I think that's on the tip of the tongue for a lot of people. But yeah, look, it's a very downtrodden fan base right now because the last couple of weeks, we spoke about this prior to the Washington Commanders game, and there was a lot of enthusiasm for the Bears heading into that game. And it just seems like it's all gone. Where you talk to any Bears fan and people are concentrating on the off-season, which should not be happening on November 12th. So that's kind of shows where we are. So yeah, it's a tough week, but we have to try and dig into it, look what the Bears have done, and figure out, is there any way of making this better for this team?
Feel like you're absolutely right. We got to make the best of what there is, even if that is not great. As such, we're going to have a little fun with Top Trio this week. Normally, we're going to talk about areas of focus or things we think the Bears need to do to win a game. We're pitching that this week. We're going to go with our biggest fears for the week. So pick your biggest fear about this game or the rest of the season, Ciaran, and let it loose.
Man, I had like 7 potential options here, and I know everyone's talking about the coaches, obviously Waldron getting fired today, and honestly though, because I think the whole emphasis for the rest of the season has to be on Caleb Williams, how he can not get ruined by potentially a staff that's going to get binned at the end of the year. So really, my biggest fear is that we have another injury on the offensive line. Because if there's any more, I don't know who's going to play. Like right now, we have one tackle, and that's Larry Borum, and he spent 8 weeks of the season on IR. So like, I find it tough analyzing Caleb Williams' performance when he has about 1.5 seconds to read a defense, go through his progressions, and deliver the ball accurately. So yeah, like my biggest fear is just it gets worse on the offensive line if players do not come back and somebody else kind of falls down, because the most important thing really in a lost season, it seems, is kind of getting Caleb Williams to develop a certain amount, but also not getting him killed.
It's a very fine line to walk, and I'm with you on that being one of the largest fears. And we're hearing a lot of the national media today and yesterday responding to the game against the Patriots, and some of them are quite willing to just go, yeah, I know the offensive line is bad, but, and I'm like, whoa, stop right there. And a lot of people are talking about when he does have a clean pocket, that it doesn't always go so well. The problem is he's getting pressure on 47% of his dropbacks right now. 1 out of every 2. It's a coin flip as to whether or not he's going to get protection or not. And the kicker is he doesn't know that before the snap. So he doesn't know when he goes to drop back or roll out or do anything else, whether he's going to have a 300-pounder in his face right away or not. So all the people saying, well, he actually got protection on that snap, he should have been fine. He didn't know that, right? 1 out of every 2. Basically every other drop back, he's getting pressure. So there isn't a way for a young quarterback, especially to settle in those circumstances. So to all the national pundits who say, well, yeah, but even when he did get a little protection, he's still been bad. Yeah, he's missing throws. I'm not saying that he looks anywhere near as good as he did right before the bye. He doesn't. In fact, many folks that I respect have said, we need to study this regression because it's not normal. I had analysts from other teams, including the one we had on last week, reach out to me and say, what the hell happened at the bye? This is weird. Like, teams don't normally do this. We don't see this level of drop-off this quickly. And yes, you can talk about the offensive line. Yes, you can talk about game plan regression, and I think you need to. We'll talk a little bit about Waldron as we go, but the offensive line is a huge point of contention, and at some point, it's going to be impossible to walk that line of development versus injury because you're just not going to have any guys to put in front of them. There are a lot of jokes today about just bring the Notre Dame offensive line. All of them would start right now. Like, we could use them. And it does become attrition. The Bears are tied with 2 other teams as having the most players who've taken over 20 snaps on their offensive line this season. It is bad by the numbers and also the performance on the field. And at some point, you're just not going to get your offense going, and you're risking getting your very highly picked quarterback like physically ruined, not just mentally ruined, which is a whole nother thing. So I'm with you on the fear about losing another offensive lineman. Not sure where that imaginary offensive lineman would come from to gather another injury, because pretty much all of them are at this point. That one would be terrible. For me, it's that things get even more ridiculous off the field. And for the folks that lived through the end of the Tressman era, you know what I'm talking about. We're talking about other assistant coaches coming out, taking non-veiled shots in the media, a complete meltdown to the point where the Bears' hand is forced to just say, forget it. Like, yes, we have to show up at the games, but we're playing our backup quarterback. We've got no offensive line. We've melted down. We're seriously considering firing our coach in season, which... The crazy thing about that being a tradition, not firing a coach in season, people say, oh, traditionally the Bears have never fired a coach in season. If that's your tradition, you've been doing terribly on picking head coaches. If the fans know that's your regular, MO, that means you're considering firing your coach in season often enough that they're aware of that. That's terrible. Like, that's the place we live in as Bears fans. But my fear is that it gets even worse to where it's just open rancor, full-on mutiny, players just not showing up for work, that kind of thing. And some people, I think, might cheer for that at this point because it would be the burn it all down mentality and start fresh. That's a rough way to get to it. We think Flus is definitely gone at the end of the year. If it was up to me, he would be gone now. I said that 2 weeks ago. Regardless of where you fall on that, it is not cool to see the team that you root for just sort of openly rolling around in poop. Like, that's just not cool. Like, the rest of the league is absolutely looking at the Bears right now and saying, what in the hell is going on with you guys? Like, and I don't really have a lot of answers for them besides, Bears, this is the way we do things, which is not a great retort. So we opened it up for questions, and many of you brave souls as fans were actually in a good enough mental place to post one this week. Thank you very much for that. I did put in the caveat that if you weren't feeling mentally strong enough to do it this week, I fully understood. Regardless, you showed up as always. We appreciate it. And we chose one from Cuff Dad. Will the Bears ever hire a high-profile name like Ben Johnson or Mike Vrabel? And will the McCaskies get out of their own way to be successful? I'm going to take the first stab at this one this week. I'm going to try and go facts, and I'm going to leave the emotion to you, Ciaran. So, will the Bears ever hire a high-profile name like Ben Johnson or Mike Vrabel? My answer is that's not typically likely because the best indicator of future performance is past performance, and the Bears have largely stayed away from the hottest candidate. They have openly chosen against hiring the higher-profile candidate, especially if that candidate had I'll just say a lot of personality. Like if this was a coach that is a power coach or like to impose their will or like to run a lot of the organization and have a lot of organizational control, the Bears have chosen over and over again not to pick that person to coach the team. So I don't know if, let's just say Ben Johnson. We'll take him first. Everybody wants Ben Johnson to come to the Bears, including me. I would like Ben Johnson to come to the Bears. In a perfect world, I think that would be a very fun match. I think it would be really good for Caleb's development, and I also think it would be good for the offensive talent around Caleb that's been assembled. I think they would be thrilled to work for a guy like Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson has command of the market. He is going to be one of the top, if not the top coaching candidates in this cycle. Probably should have been hired as a head coach last year, had interviews, chose to return to Detroit. I don't think he'll make that choice again, regardless of how Detroit's season ends. And he will command top of market dollars, and he can pretty much write his own ticket. So if he says, I want control over X, Y, and Z, he's going to get it from some organization, and it's not likely going to be the Bears. Now, as a Bears fan, that pains me, but as a realist, I also look at what they've done in the past and the patterns they've exhibited in hiring, and they tend to take the safer, quieter, more middle of the road candidate. So will they ever take that top of market hot candidate and lure him away from the other offers that he is sure to have? I don't know that they will. Vrabel, on the other hand, is a big personality and definitely wants to exert control. Got into a power struggle in Tennessee, lost that struggle, obviously, was relieved of his head coaching duties. There isn't any indication that he's willing to give up on a bunch of those things, as some second-time head coaches have done and said, hey, I had personnel power last time. I realize I have to give that up to get another shot. There's no indication from the Vrabel camp that that's part of his package. It could be, but he is a big personality. He's going to exert his will, and that is not going to make him, I would say, a favorable candidate unless they shift course. As to the McCaskies getting out of their own way to be successful, they haven't put a successful program together. They've tried many different things. They've hired consultants. They hired Ernie Corsi. They've now hired a president. They've tried to distance themselves from football decision-making, but they still hire the people that control those decisions. So, as such, they control those decisions. By extension, that's part of being an owner. And they've not put together a successful program. They're certainly not maximizing their franchise. If anything, they're actually running it into the ground and reducing the value. Now, that being said, still one of the most valuable teams in the NFL, always will be. It's the largest single undivided market in the NFL, and it will be an attractive job because of that. But those two factors of the power structure that is largely staying away from high-profile, high-personality candidates, and the fact that the ownership group hasn't exhibited those traits in the past in their leadership searches leads me to believe that in the future, it's not going to be terribly different. Do I think it needs to be? I absolutely do. Do I think they will be the ones to do it? I don't.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, you have to look at kind of what they've done, like you mentioned, in the past, but even just the other decisions that have been made from this organization. So, for years, they didn't want to go on Hard Knocks because they didn't want all the extra stuff that happened within the organization, or potentially they didn't want some of their secrets from inside going out, even though that was never going to happen, right? And you make a good point about the McCaskies and the fact that what is the common denominator of all these different coaches that don't work out? Like, they're the only ones that are there. Like, yes, Ryan Poles is different. Kevin Warren is different, and we want to believe that that is something that can, I guess, change things to where maybe the luck might be in. But it's hard for me to sit here as a Bears fan and say that when Eberflus gets fired at the end of the year that they're going to make the right decision, because they don't make the right decision 9 times out of 10. And that is the problem when you look at this here, because I find it hard to believe that at the end of last year, Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles were completely in lockstep that Matt Eberflus is the guy going forward, because what was there to prove to you that that was the case? Okay, the defense started playing a little bit better when they traded for Montez Sweat. So I'm supposed to believe a GM that knows that he's about to make probably the most important decision a GM can make in terms of you have the number 1 overall pick, you're going to pick a quarterback, that you're not going to try and link a quarterback with a coach, knowing that if it doesn't work out in his first year, you're probably going to have to fire the coach. And my worry is that there is meddling from above that stopped that from happening. And look, we can't say that for certain, but we've heard the rumors from the past, and that has happened. And then you see the story from Brad Biggs that comes out that actually it was a 5-year deal instead of a 4-year deal, and you're like, was it purely that the money became an option, and if you still have 3 years left on your contract, are they really going to let that happen? And that is a problem. You then hear the rumors that Ben Johnson was interested in the Bears gig last offseason, and you're like, I just find it hard to believe that one of the head coaching cycle, kind of the hot candidates that other teams wanted to hire, but he decided to go back to Detroit if he wanted the Bears job, that you have a GM that's not going to want to pursue that. And that's where I think the worry has to come in. So to the question is, will the Bears ever go for kind of that type of candidate? The obvious answer is no, especially when it comes to those power guys. So Mike Vrabel was one that was mentioned. There's no way in hell they're gonna have a Mike Vrabel. It's just not gonna happen. It's the same thing like any kind of hard-nosed kind of someone that might disrupt the apple cart within the organization is not going to get brought in here. There was, like, everybody was talking for really since Eberflus was hired about Jim Harbaugh. They were never bringing him in because they knew that he would disrupt things within the organization. Unfortunately, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but the only way I see them making a correct decision is honestly if ownership and anyone above the GM get out of the way. Let him make a decision so that if he does make it wrong, he's gone. And that's it. Because the last thing you want is that there's 3 or 4 candidates and he makes a decision, but then there's little links that, oh, well, the ownership were on board for this guy versus this guy. It's hard to think that they're going to make the right decision. And I'm sorry to say, but you just have to look at what happened with the offensive coordinator. That wasn't just an Eberflus hiring. Like, he would have been involved, but Ryan Pauls would have been in that room. Kevin Warren would have been in that room. And 5 of the 8 guys or 5 of the 9 guys that they interviewed are doing pretty damn good in the league right now. So it's hard to imagine that even when they fire Eberflus at the end of the year, that they're going to make the right decision. I honestly feel like they're going to have to be lucky, because that seems to be what is happening. Like, they don't go for a Ben Johnson, but they go for a different young offensive coordinator that's not going to cost as much, but suddenly he actually turns into a good head coach. Like, a little bit like Kevin O'Connell with the Vikings, where he wasn't the biggest name. He was one of the last guys that was hired that cycle, but probably was one of the better head coaches that was hired that cycle. And I feel like that's where the Bears are going to have to get to. They're going to have to kind of get lucky by knowing the style of coach they want, but it might not be the top of everybody's lists.
Yeah, it brings me back to one of my favorite sayings, better lucky than good, and they're gonna need it. So with that joyful bundle of hope out of the way, we appreciate fan questions of the week. We'll be sending you out a sticker for that. With all that said, we're going to try and keep it light, and that's tough because it's Packers week, but we've got a treat for you. One of the best human beings I know, even if he is a Packers fan, reigning NFL Fan of the Year, Tom Grossi's on the show. You'll see that interview right here. This week on Bear Errors, we're going to have a lot of fun. Not because it's Packers week. That won't be fun. We're going to have fun because we have the one, the only, Tom Grossi, Packers fan, host of the Packast and NFL Fan of the Year, as if we needed any more accolades for you, Mr. Grossi, how are you doing?
I'm great. It's like you said, it's Bears week. So this is exciting time. Both our teams are at the top of the division. Just the competitive spirit has never been higher, especially in Chicago. Things are as steady as ever, and I just can't wait for an excellent game on Sunday.
I'm feeling a little bit of competitive spirit coming up all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm. It just builds in your chest. Some would say that's depression or anxiety, but I like to call it for the Bears competitive spirit.
Well, I appreciate your diagnosis much more than what everybody else is saying it is. With that, we're going to kick it off. As always, we're going to ask you a question apiece, and then we're going to open the floor, as dangerous as that might be, to a Packers fan such as yourself to ask us a question about whatever's left of the Chicago Bears. So, Ciaran, you get to kick it off this week. What do you got for Tom?
I have a genuine question and a not so genuine question. So I'm going to go with the not so genuine question first.
Perfect.
So who is the Packers' best player this year, and why is it their Irish punter Daniel Whelan?
Okay, let's actually just be that is the most serious question that you could possibly ask, because we are wheeling and dealing, ladies and gentlemen. So let's I want to talk about Daniel Whelan. I'm so glad that we could actually have this conversation. So Whelan last year comes in, and I know, like, already a ton of Irish fans are super pumped up. And I'm like, all right, let me look into this guy. And he started off pretty solid, and then as, like, it got colder and the weather got a little bit colder, his averages went down a little bit. And I remember in the offseason, someone did an interview with him, and he spoke about it and was like, yeah, like, I am going to be working nonstop in the offseason to make sure that those numbers get better and things improve. And just, like, as an Irishman with some Italian mixed in, I was like, oh, this guy's going to work. Like, he is nonstop going to work. It's just the way that he came off. I was like, oh, he's going to practice. And my man is killing it out there. And I know that you can't really compare because, as Caleb Williams said, your punter's not going to be getting any work. But here with Daniel Whelan, like, he honestly has been phenomenal this season. And he's been so steady, so consistent. I do, of course, want to see, like, how he's going to look as the weather does get colder in Green Bay. But he has been a game changer, in the special teams, and a special teams that has not always been good. I'm not even going to say great. It's not always been good. And the Packers kind of had a revolving door for a few years at punter. We had Bajorquez in there, and now you bring in Whelan, and he's been lighting it up. So I'm so happy for him just as a person, and to see him kind of grow from year to year. It's been awesome to see, and it has not gone unnoticed. He's been shouted out many times here on the channel.
You have no idea how depressed I was when he actually became a Green Bay Packer, because I think I was like tweeting about him almost on a daily basis when we were waiting to see who he was going to get picked up by, and then he decides to go to Green Bay, and then suddenly I forgot who Daniel Whelan was. So anyway, it's
like when you can't take care of just like this beautiful. Just think about like a puppy, right? And you're just like, I know that this puppy could go to a better home. I know there's going to be a big farm, can run around, right? Chicago, not a lot of space, right? Not a lot outside. It's very metropolis. But here in Green Bay, we've given him the best home. He's winning football games, and we are taking very good care of him.
Yes. And now to my actual question. I think we always think of the Packers as like the offense, the Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre, all that sort of stuff. But I actually wanted to ask you with the defense, because before, it was always kind of like average, or Green Bay fans yelling at their defensive coordinator, what the hell are you doing? But then this year you look at them and it's the takeaways. They average like 2.1 takeaways a game, which for most people they're not kind of used to. And my question to you is this just the new DC getting this unit together and just performing at a level that's just different than what you've seen? Or is it the likes of getting in Shaver McKinney and some of those other guys they got in free agency that's also helped it? But what do you think the main reason for the uptick in that performance level is?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think that you're 100% spot on that every week Packers fans were yelling at the defensive coordinator. I mean, real quick, we were talking about the combine off air, and I think I was saying fire Joe Barry just about every single week for years on end. And I met Joe Barry in a bar at the combine, and we just locked eyes from across the bar. And I was like, oh no. And he walked over to me, and I was like, hey coach, how you doing? Like, I'm Tom Grossi. He's like, I know who you are. And I was like, oh no, like this is not gonna, he's like, you're amazing. I love the work you do. And I was like, whoa, okay. We missed those videos. But to answer your question, the Packers and their history with defensive coordinators hasn't been ideal. Obviously, you have Dom. I'm just going to go back with the past decade or so. So you have Dom Capers, right? And Dom Capers, when he first comes into Green Bay, he's been in the league forever. But when he comes into Green Bay, it is a focus on turnovers. And it's one of the reasons why we win the Super Bowl that year, Super Bowl 45 against the Steelers. Because even though they weren't the best defense, they were opportunistic. They were ball hawks, right? You also helps that you have like Nick Collins, Charles Woodson back there. Kind of helps a little bit. And then as kind of time goes on, you unfortunately have Nick Collins leaves, Charles Woodson leaves, like there's injuries that happen, and the Packers are constantly trying to fix that secondary. They spend their first and second round picks in 2015 on Quentin Rollins and Marius Randall. That does not work out. They constantly are going after, it was a Josh, losing his name right this second. It's not Jacobs because that's our running back. I don't remember his name all the time, but he played like 8 games in college, and it was like, draft him with the first round pick, and we got him second. And he did not work out either. And so I think it's kind of been a revolving door of talent and personnel, which has been a problem. You got rid of Capers. You bring in guys like Mike Pettin. That didn't really work out so well. You bring in Joe Barry. That really didn't work well. And so now bringing in Jeff Hafley, I think his commitment to being aggressive and saying turnovers are going to be one of our biggest priorities, and seeing that after a month of football this season, we have already surpassed the amount of turnovers that we had all of last year, I think it's a huge mindset shift, one. So I think that makes a difference. The only thing that's really been disappointing is the pass rush this year. That's for a litany of reasons, too. We can get into that. But you bring up a really important point about bringing in guys like Xavier McKinney. And the defense, especially the safety unit, let me be clear. The safety unit for a while has been just disregarded. Last year, I had this conversation with Mark Murphy, the president of the Packers, before, and we just had like random names back there. Like Rudy Ford was back there as like one of our starting safeties. And listen, no offense to Rudy Ford, but I asked Mark Murphy straight up. I was like, so are we just kind of throwing our hands up and saying, let's see what we got when it comes to safeties? And he's like, yeah, pretty much. Because last year was a test year, right? Where we're seeing like, okay, like what's Jordan Love going to look like? First year without Aaron Rodgers, blah, blah, blah. And while the safety unit wasn't god awful, there needed to be talent there. And that's when Xavier McKinney became a free agent. I was banging the drum nonstop of like, we need to bring him in, because that kind of investment, and when the Packers are a very draft and develop kind of team, right, for just about every single position, that was one where it just was not working out, or they were just getting, undrafted free agents. They weren't putting a ton of capital into that. So to get Xavier McKinney, who is not only young, who is in his prime and is a phenomenal football player, when we got him, one, I was surprised, but I was so happy because I knew that he would revolutionize like that safety unit, because we have not had a safety like Xavier McKinney in a long, long time. And then on top of that, they addressed that in the draft as well. They bring in some rookies. And then, of course, you have guys like Jair Alexander, who are always going to be great in that secondary. And then Eric Stokes, he's coming back from injury. We're kind of waiting and hoping that gets a little bit better. But I think it's a mix of two things. It's Jeff Hafley coming in with this mentality of like, hey, we're going to be aggressive. We're going to take the ball away. And having a guy like McKinney back there who is just going to make that secondary better. So even though our pass rush is not really up to par right now, we're still getting those takeaways, even though we're not able to get after the quarterback right away.
To be fair to all the Packers fans who say we don't talk about the Packers on Bootleg, untrue, we do, but you guys are just used to being talked about so much that if we like lay off for a minute, you all go, oh, wait, we did say that McKinney is the best free agent addition in the league this year. So we're giving credit where credit is due. And to follow Ciaran's lead, I'm going to go with my non-serious question first, because McKinney actually figures into it. So just on this defense, not the special teams, not the offense, just on your defense, you have a McKinney and a McDuffie. You have a Valentine and a Ballantyne. You have a Walker, a Wyatt, a Wilson, a Williams, and a Wooden. Is Dr. Seuss your GM? Do they do this on purpose?
I mean, listen. Yes, I think Dr. Seuss might be our GM. Because listen, it was good enough to fool the Jets into giving us a second-round pick for Aaron Rodgers. So I don't care if Dr. Seuss is our GM because it's working out so far. But yeah, for our defense, we have wild names. And I know you look at we're talking about the defense, but the offense, same thing. We got Love, we got Romeo, and you got Valentine on the other side. So this is really just a team filled with a lot of love right now. And I think that's what's one of the reasons why they're so successful.
Yeah, kumbaya on both sides of the ball. And I'm with you. Seuss is killing it. Just keep him in the office. Give him all the game tape he needs. He's doing a fine job. Yeah. On to the serious question. Aaron Jones was a focal point of the Packers rushing offense for years. He moved on to the Vikings. The team brought in Josh Jacobs, who you mentioned earlier, who's played really well so far, 4.8 yards a carry. And he's taken the lion's share this season. 3 times as many as Emmanuel Wilson. How do you see this revamped backfield playing out down the stretch? And do you see that importance ramping up as the weather turns, as it does in Green Bay, nasty?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because the running back room does not look like what was anticipated heading into this season, right? So they go in and get Josh Jacobs, and for 45 minutes, every Packers fan was the happiest person on earth because we had the greatest running back room in the history of running back rooms because we had Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones. And I was like, oh man, this is about to be amazing. That lasted 45 minutes until Aaron Jones went to the Vikings and broke my heart. So Aaron Jones is a great player, right? And it's not just in the run game. It is in the passing game. He's a phenomenal locker room leader. One of the things that I think a lot of folks in Green Bay will never forget is Dontavian Wicks dropped the ball last year, and he's like coming off the sideline, his head is down, and Aaron Jones comes up and like picks his head up. Like that's just kind of those locker room guys that Aaron Rodgers talks about, like the Randall Cobbs, like all that great stuff. So one, it didn't look that way because one, Aaron Jones is gone, but two, there was going to be A.J. Dillon, who was still going to be hanging out there. They brought him back on that weird, like, 1 year, $1 million deal. They kind of just found some change in the couch cushions. But then they also drafted Marshawn Lloyd, right? And bringing in another running back that they hope could, be that bruiser. And so, unfortunately, Lloyd goes on IR pretty darn quickly. He is actually activated to return this Sunday against the Bears, so that's actually really fun. Josh Jacobs was talking about that, how they ride with each other every day, just kind of keep him in the game, and that's awesome. So I think the reason why you bring in Josh Jacobs, even to the point where you are lowballing Aaron Jones, is because Josh Jacobs is a guy that you can hand the ball to 30 times. And I know with Aaron Jones, and I love Aaron Jones, and you can hand him the ball a lot, but there's a lot of miles on those legs. And while, I love Aaron Jones, but he does have some injury things and just he's an older guy and things as the season progresses, it gets a little bit tougher. He was phenomenal in the Cowboys game in the playoffs in the wild card round, and that was awesome. But all that being said, I think Josh Jacobs, the amount of yardage that he already has this season, I think is going to be amazing for Green Bay down the stretch. And if Marshawn Lloyd can even just be above average to start, they could be a pretty damn good They could be a pretty damn good offense, and they could be a balanced football team. Because I know with Jordan Love right now, the concern is he's throwing interceptions, which, by the way, NFC North fans, no one can say anything about interceptions after this week, with Sam Darnold throwing 3 and Jared Goff throwing 5. There's no more talk about that. We're all done. But honestly, I think that Josh Jacobs is going to be a key part of this offense if they're going to succeed and make this playoff push. Because he can be the guy you just hand the ball to 35 times if you need. And because the unknown of Marshawn Lloyd is there, it's just exciting at this point. So I have no real concerns. Jacobs has been a great pickup so far. I know he doesn't have a ton of touchdowns, so fantasy people are upset. But just as a Packers fan, he's done everything that I could want so far.
Well, don't worry about the fantasy needs of fantasy people.
No, exactly.
All right. With all that being said, Danger Zone, you get to ask us about the wreckage that is the Chicago Bears.
Yes. So I have a legit question for you. So it's not even a joke question. It's not even going to be poking fun, because a few years ago, when you had a quarterback named Mitch Trubisky, right? Trubisky, there was after the double doink and all that stuff, and then Trubisky started struggling because you guys stopped having a run game, but that's neither here nor there. And really there wasn't a ton of support for Trubisky. He wasn't able to be a mobile QB, what have you. I made a video, said Trubisky's not the whole problem in Chicago, right? And I feel like what has happened over the years has just been Groundhog Day over and over and over again. And it's not in terms of hey, head coach not working out, QB not working out, et cetera, high draft pick. It's not even that. it's the situations that you're putting like young rookie QBs in. And heading into this offseason, it felt like the narrative had finally shifted, right? In which it's, hey, Caleb Williams is going into a much better situation that Justin Fields ever went into. The offensive line should be better. And granted, it was. Interior, we'll see. Center, we'll see. But you're going to go get your wide receiver weapons. You brought in Keenan Allen as a veteran. Of course, you have DJ Moore you made that trade for. You're going and get rookie wide receivers. So my question to you is it at this point, is there like no other fingers to point other than like the front office and the ownership as a potential, hey, how do we shift courses here? Because I feel like for Bears fans and just being aware of Bears fans and the team and being in the division, it just seems like every single year they run into this. Eberflus was on the hot seat last year, but then the defense got better, especially after that Montez Sweat trade. And it's like, well, he's a defensive guy, so let's see, maybe he'll turn the ship around. And here we are. It's week 10. You just fired Shane Waldron. Eberflus is still on the hot seat. So my question to you is, what actually prompts these changes in Chicago? Because you're having players and coaches, kind of this revolving door. What actually sparks that change?
Ciaran, you get the opening shots.
I'm going to answer your question with a question.
Yes.
Tom, can you play offensive line?
I can at least get in the way. I'll do a great job. I'll just throw myself at some feet and maybe they'll trip over me.
Yeah, but like realistically, you hit it dead on the money when you mentioned ownership, general manager, front office, all this. It's all the same. And unfortunately, it seems like for many people within the organization, there's an acceptance for mediocrity where you're not trying to get the best in class. And that's always been the problem, is that if you know you're going to get rid of a coach, instead of going out and basically trying to get the best possible guy that's out there, it doesn't matter whether it's offense, defense, but it seems like it has to be somebody that fits within the values of the organization, the values of the ownership, when in reality, the only values that should matter is, can this coach help you win football games? And that doesn't typically happen. Like, it's not really that, oh, they only hire defensive guys or they only hire offensive guys. You need to get the right guy. And unfortunately for the Bears, and EJ, you mentioned it earlier on in the podcast, that like it shouldn't be something that you hang your hat on, that you don't fire coaches mid-season. Because if a coach can't get the best out of your team, what is the point in holding on to those coaches to then further inflict damage within your organization? If you know it's not going to work, you make that change and then you do as much work as you possibly can to be prepared for when you need to hire the right guy. And unfortunately, and you know this yourself, Tom, that at all levels, everything has to work in unison.
Absolutely.
Right? The ownership needs to be spot on with some of the decisions that they make. The general manager needs to find the right coach. Then once they do find the right coach, that coach needs to be able to ID the right assistant coaches. And unfortunately for the Bears, is their head coach right now, Matt Eberflus, can't do that. He simply can't get it right, because they brought in 9 offensive coordinator candidates. 5 of them are doing really, really well in the league right now. And they only gave Shane Waldron the second interview. So you have things like that. And then if you did make the right decisions there, well, then you need to make sure that you get the right players that fit a system of the right coach. The problem is when you get the coach wrong, you're then IDing players that are trying to fit in with their system, and then suddenly the coach is gone in 2 years and you're doing the whole thing again. And that's why it needs to work in unison. But if you make one mistake and break that chain, it's all going to fall apart. And unfortunately for the Bears, they've not made the right decisions at the higher levels of management and then kind of moving down to the coach. And that kind of shows why there's a very inconsistent performance level over a long period of time.
Yeah, because I mean, it's some Bears took this as like an insult, but it legitimately wasn't. Is when they were saying like, "Hey, we got Caleb Williams." I was like, you guys don't know how to develop quarterbacks. Your most successful quarterback was Jay Cutler that you traded for. You know, and like I think there's just a history, and I'm saying this as a Packers fan because when Jordan Love came into the league, obviously it was COVID, you know, didn't get preseason, didn't get a practice or whatever. Those first 2 years were rough though. Every time we saw him, it was rough. The footwork was not good. He did not look good. Aaron Rodgers didn't look good when he came into the league either. But bringing back Tom Clements, who then decided to stay with the Packers, and they should build a statue of him outside of Lambeau.
Yep.
Those are the kind of guys within the building that make those kind of differences, especially for a young QB. And with Caleb Williams, who obviously has the talent, I don't think there's anybody who's denying that. But again, you're seeing with Anthony Richardson too, right? The situations that they're put in and the coaching that they have to help them, not just on the field, because we talk about Anthony Richardson all day and say, oh, well, he needs more reps, but if those reps aren't working because the fundamentals aren't there yet, and he's not being developed the right way, even off the field or in practice, that's going to obviously impact the game. And when Caleb is just thrown to the wolves in terms of like, hey, you're the guy that we got to throw you out there, that's what I'm kind of asking from a logistical and organizational standpoint of, are there just the people that are in charge who are making these hiring decisions? Is that what ultimately needs to change? And in that sense, like, is there hope for Bears fans coming? Because as many know, like, it's tough to get rid of ownership, and it seems like a lot that's where it's coming down from.
I feel like they concentrate on a lot of the wrong things. And by the wrong things, I don't mean they're bad qualities to want, but they don't fit together and they don't necessarily come first. So the Bears organization, Bears ownership, has said what they value is stability, right? They want continuity, right? In the last head coach hiring cycle before they hired Matt Nagy, they cited the Steelers and the Giants, right? Old school NFL money, continuity. Well, continuity is only a good thing if you're winning, right? If you have quality people in your organization and you're creating quality results, then continuity is great. You want to keep those people and keep producing those results. And we've seen lots of organizations in the NFL that are capable of doing that. We've seen the Ravens do it in their draft history and their coaching history, quite frankly, at this point. Harbaugh, one of the longest tenured coaches in the league, and with good reason. He's made smart decisions and he's kept that team relevant through ups and downs. You have to get everything right. Ciaran said it. Has to work together. You have to get a quarterback. You can't play in this league without a quarterback. Well, they got one that can play. We know he can play. We've seen him play well, even in a Bears uniform. But here we are, 10 weeks into the season, and the regression is obvious. And you can talk about a lot of factors, but you get back to those, okay, so who made the decision for the guy that was guiding him? Who made the decision for the guy that was guiding him, right? It still comes back to ownership. And they like to say, hey, we're not football people. They're very adamant about that. So we've hired people to insulate us from making football decisions. Well, you still hired those people. You're still responsible for your $6, $7, $8 billion product not crashing into the canyon because you didn't finish building the bridge. It's still on you. And I used to, as a Bears fan, shy away from that. I always thought it was kind of lazy to say, oh,
sure,
well, until ownership changes, nothing's going to change. I was like, there's so many layers in a football organization. We can fix this from the ground up. We can rebuild it, right? There are lots of changes we can make. We don't have to blame ownership. We don't have to blame them for being cheap. And in a lot of ways, they aren't. They spend money on players. But again, I feel like they reach for the wrong things, right? And they say, well, it's not our fault. We hired somebody that was supposed to do this and they didn't do it well. Well, at some point, this becomes a pattern. You outlined it. They're in exactly the same cycle that they're in with Trubisky. Draft a new quarterback, hope he fixes everything. Oh, he didn't. Throw the coaching staff out with the bathwater. Second-year quarterback, it's a new system. Doesn't work. Can the coach? New quarterback. Oh, didn't work. 1 year in, Justin Fields, new coach, new system, doesn't work. Caleb Williams, in we go. Looks like exactly the same thing. It's Groundhog's Day, and it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
And again, as a younger Bears fan, I didn't buy into that narrative. As I have gotten more involved with this as my work and as business and have dug into the backside more often, multiple teams, how is everybody else structured? How do successful organizations work? What does it look like? Unfortunately, my answer is it's not going to change until the ownership changes. The ownership is fractured. There are 11 McCaskies involved, along with 2 other principals. Most of them hold 3.8% not Virginia. She has a share, but not a majority share. There are other stakeholders involved as well. And even Virginia said, we can either be the McCaskies that own the Bears or the rich McCaskies, but we cannot be the rich McCaskies that own the Bears. And that is the definition of old NFL money versus new NFL money. If you said to Stan Kroenke, hey, you're going to have to pay Ben Johnson because Ben Johnson's the best guy on the market. You're going to have to pay Ben Johnson $74 million. You got to put that in escrow tomorrow. Stan Kroenke says, are you sure he's the best guy? Football people say, yeah. Here's your $74 million. I'll go away now. Right? You ask the McCaskies to do that, and there's 11 people they have to ask. They've got a ton of money tied up in Arlington Heights. They don't have any cash. They go, you know what? We don't only have 2 years left on this Eberflus deal. We have 3. Are we going to pay him to sit on the sidelines and not coach? That's a lot of $1 million we already put in escrow. It's a completely different calculus than new NFL money. So if you want the results to change, the process has to change. And the process isn't going to change until that structure of ownership comes in. Until one person buys the team, or as is more common now, an ownership group with one person as their head. And they come in and say, hey, don't mess with my $10 billion toy. Mm-hmm. Like, you're messing with my $10 billion toy and you're making $20 million? GTFO. Like, I'm going to get another guy that's not going to mess with my $10 billion toy. And until that happens, I don't see it changing, because this is the way they have made the decisions to kind of insulate themselves from risk and say, no, we just grab that non-boat rocking person in the middle of the order because it won't upset us. And it kind of just goes with the flow. Well, the flow's not good anymore. And if you want to see it reversed, Ciaran, you said something interesting. You said, if one thing breaks, it all goes bad. I would flip that on its head and say, if one thing breaks, happens to be the biggest thing in ownership, everything goes the other way. And Washington is the example for that.
Yes.
Down bad organization, 2 decades, as bad as it could be. Fan base, completely downtrodden, no success. Go out, get a quarterback, get a coach, new owner, new GM, 1 year. If they win tomorrow night, they're winning the NFC East. Like, straight up. 1 year. So if one thing breaks, and of course it's the most important thing, and as you said, Tom, the hardest thing to move, it can go the other way as well. But Bears fans, I don't blame you at all if you can't see that right now, because it's been this way for your entire life.
Well, it's also, right, you mentioned that, because that is just communicating with fans, like talking to Commanders fans. And when I went there in DC, of when Dan Snyder's gone, we're throwing a parade. Right, because it makes you not want to be a fan, because it's like you said, you can get rid of coaches, you can get rid of GMs, you can get rid of quarterbacks. You've done them all, right? In the span of 10, 15 years, you have. And again, this is not boastful, I promise. Talking to Mark Murphy this past August, he has hired, his whole tenure there, he has hired 1 GM and 1 head coach.
That's
and
right.
That's it. And you talk about consistency, you're 100% correct. When you look at the organizations that you mentioned, right? Like you talk about the Steelers, you talk about the Ravens, and just that consistency that's there, that works, like you said, because they're winning games.
That's right.
Right? If you are stuck of like, hey, we got to make sure, we do right by our people, we're going to try to keep things going. Okay, great. But if Eberflus, who already was on the hot seat last season, is not working out, and you are about to go get the first overall pick again, and you are going to go spend it on what was supposed to be a generational quarterback, and this is not putting down Caleb Williams in any way, shape, or form, you better hope that this works out, or everybody's losing their job, right? We mentioned the Jets before, like in jest, but after Aaron Rodgers, people losing their job. You already saw the head coach gone, like GM gone. People are losing their jobs. And the problem, it seems, in Chicago, are the right people are not losing their jobs. Mm-hmm. And I hate to, I never advocate a lot for, unless Joe Barry, firing like that. But in that sense, you had, oh man, who was your really long time president? Is that Phillips?
Yeah, Ted Phillips.
Yep.
Yeah, is he still a consultant? Because years ago when they got rid of him, he was still coming on as a consultant.
No, they replaced him.
Retired.
They replaced him with Ernie Accorsi.
Yeah, because it's that who is in those meetings, who is doing those interviews for the coaches, right? To bring in the GMs, because again, that's who you need to look at. Because if you are having players, coaches, and GMs constantly just being a carousel over and over again, who is staying? because those issues are continuing to happen.
Yeah, and that was what I avoided and sort of looked away from as a fan previously, and again over the last, I would say, 3 to 5 years, it's become unavoidable. And people say the same thing to me. That's not right. We can change it because everybody wants to change it because ownership is the hardest thing to move in the NFL. But I've come to the conclusion over, again, many years of looking at this and watching it play out over and over and over again, that until there's change there, some kind of functional, structural change, there won't be change that cascades down. Other than that, Ciaran said it earlier in the podcast, they're just going to have to get lucky. They're going to have to hire some hot, like, not even OC, but like quarterback coach, because he'll be the 5th candidate and nobody will look at him, and he's just got to come out and be awesome. That's it. That's the only sort of silver dart to get out of this entire process. So with that, Tom, we've used up a lot of your time. Can't thank you enough for coming on Bear Era. As sad as it was this week and as happy as you are likely to be after Sunday, can't thank you enough. Appreciate your time, man.
Appreciate you guys for having me. Thank you so much.
Always great to have somebody of Tom's stature on the show and to bring a little bit of levity. He is always going to find the funny side of things, even if everything going on around the Bears right now is very unfunny to us Bears fans. Awesome that he agreed to be with us on Bear Errors, even though that's not what he signed up for a month ago.
Tom is always a lot of fun. Like, I've always loved kind of following him along because his tweets are hilarious, but also some of the videos that he puts out. And to be fair, he is a absolute stalwart. He is a great dude. I know anyone that's been following him for a long time, he does a lot of help for charity, all that sort of stuff. And it's fantastic to have him on. Having that bit of levity, even though he's a Packers fan, is good, because I think most Bears fans can realize we kind of need a little bit of levity, even though it has to come from the rivals. But yeah, it was great having Tom on the show.
One of the best people I know, one of the hardest working people I know as well. I've interacted with Tom personally several times. He is always going, always driving. His work ethic is something else. So glad he was able to take a little bit of time out of his very busy schedule and join us here on the show. That brings us to Mike on the mic. As it does every week, Mike was here earlier doing his opening of the helmet box, but he gets to give you his unfiltered thoughts as usual, and you'll see them right here.
Thank you as always, EJ and Ciaran. And well, Bears fans, Packers week couldn't have had a worse time, huh? You know, the only thing worse than being in a tailspin when your division rival comes into town is that the Chicago Bears have scored a total of 10 points in the first quarter of games this season. 3 in week 2 and 7 in week 5. Since their bye week, the Bears have a total of 2 touchdowns and are averaging 3.7 yards a play and are 6 of 40 on third down, which was against the 22nd, 27th, and 31st ranked third down defenses. Getting ahead of the other team's offense, gaining momentum, taking pressure off of your defense, and building confidence for Caleb Williams and this offense by scoring early. That is what we're highlighting here on Mike and the Mic. If the Bears want to steady the ship after firing Shane Waldron and avoid a 4-game losing streak, that is what they're going to have to do this Sunday against the Green Bay Packers. Back to EJ and Ciaran.
Always great to hear from Mike. We got to do that twice this week, which is a ton of fun. Got to make his debut on quote-unquote the big show, even though maybe not the most fun show of the week with everything that's going on in Bears land and the Packers looming. However, always happy to have him be part of the show. And with that, we are pretty much out. Again, thanks to Blue Wire. Thanks to Homage. Thanks to everybody who stuck with us. We hope you enjoyed it. It's not the most fun time of the year, but again, we'll be here every week and we'll try and make it as fun as we can for you. Ciaran, any final thoughts as we kick it off?
As we head into Packer week, the Bears sent Waldron packing. Can the Bears send the Packers packing back up to Green Bay and come away with the win? Probably not, but we'll see how it goes.
We'll see how it goes. I love the theme about packing. With that, we're going to pack it in for this week, and we will see you next week on a rebranded Bear Era. See you then, everybody.